Our man Chris Brown is healthy, and he is up on the sidelines inside the Ad Pro Sports Training Center where practice is underway. The Thursday practice, the Bills getting set for the New York Giants, having just defeated the New York Jets. Chris Brown, hello, Chris. Come in, Chris. Can you hear me? Come in, Chris.
Yes, I can hear you. How are we doing?
We're doing great. How's it in there? It's unfortunate in September when you got to practice indoors, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but, when the field gets that wet, you don't want to risk injury due to poor footing and that kind of thing, so you understand it. And I know Coach McDermott likes to get his guys on grass as much as possible, knowing it's more forgiving on the joints.
Got it. Chris, Josh Allen, what do you think? And again, we were just talking about the contrast between him and Sam Darnold, who's out with mono. I think Josh, we talked about this a bit yesterday, he's probably thinking, I got to bounce back this week, right, based on the 4 first-half turnovers last Sunday.
Well, yeah, from the turnovers, certainly. But I think a lot of people overlooked the fact that the offense was moving the football, and he was pretty efficient in the first half. He was 15 to 23 for 141 yards. That's a pretty good completion percentage. I mean, I said back in training camp, in his rookie year, he completed 52% of his passes, as Chad Hall is clowning around behind me, the receivers coach. And if he could get it up to 58 to 60% here in year 2, by the time year 2 is in the books, I think that's a pretty good jump for him. He was more like he was in the season finale last year when he completed 65% of his passes in that first half. And I think it was partially due to the fact that there were a lot of high percentage throws in the game plan early on when they came out throwing on the first 18 plays. So if they can duplicate that going forward and his completion percentage can stay somewhere in the mid-60s, this offense is going to take a sizable step forward, not an incremental one.
Yeah, I agree with you there, Brownie. And I think one of the things, too, is I think, let's face it, there were 9 new guys out there. There were a lot of new faces. They didn't get a play up front. I think the offensive line, it started to gel a little bit better in the second half when they started to hand it off. No question, though, it's hard for an offensive line to get their run game going when there's only 18 pass plays to call, in the first quarter and a half of the game. So I think you can maybe give the O-line a little bit of a pass on the run game, getting going all the way in the second half, just because they didn't have that many run plays called. I mean, how do you evaluate those guys when, that's not part of the game plan? I think, it's probably not going to be that this week, 18 straight passes to start the game. But I think that kind of got in the way of a little bit of a rhythm for the offensive line.
I mean, I suppose you can make that argument. I liked what they did for the most part from a pass protection standpoint, but I understand what you're saying. It's kind of hard to get into a rhythm in the run game when you're not doing it, and then all of a sudden, second quarter, here we go, let's get out of our own end zone and give the ball to Frank.
Not doing it and not having done it.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I totally get that. Now, the interesting thing is I think most people would argue that the strength of the Jets' defensive line is their run-stopping ability, and you would say the same thing about the Giants. If you're comparing strengths and weaknesses, their strength is stopping the run, not getting to the passer. So there's a good chance you're going to could see heavy throwing again, or at least more of a mixed bag than you did last week. But I think throwing is going to be part of the game plan this week as well.
Chris Brown, Bills Insider from BuffaloBills.com. He's on the line with us, and you can see him on MSG with us, reporting from the Bills practice going on inside the Ad Pro Sports Training Center. Steve raised this concern the other day here, Chris, about the Bills' state of mind. A big comeback win against the Jets, going up against the Giants team that struggled defensively against the Cowboys. What do you know about Sean McDermott, and maybe what you've seen this week? What does he do to prevent that team, his Bills team, from letting down, from taking the Giants for granted here? What do you think his strategy is?
I don't think he's got to worry about that. Like he said at the beginning of the offseason, his roster, he's got about 90% of the guys that buy 100% into what he's selling and the way they operate here on a day-to-day basis. So he said they've got just about everybody they need on the bus to be a successful team, to be a consistent team, and to be a team that operationally doesn't change week to week based on the opponent that they're facing. They go into it with the same approach each and every week because they got grinders here. So I think what you're looking at and what you probably got out of the week 1 victory was a reinforcement on why this team grinds the way they do. Never say die, game's never over. We play the same way on every single play, start to finish, regardless of the time on the clock or the score on the board. And when we do that, more often than not, we'll come out on top at the end of the game. And as bleak as it looked last week in the third quarter, they stuck to that and got rewarded for it. So the biggest thing to me that came out of that game was the reinforcement of the process.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I think it was almost a perfect game for Sean McDermott to have that happen, in the fact that they get the win, but they got it doing exactly what they've been asked to do, and that's grind it, hang in there, and overcome their own problems and worry about themselves rather than their opponents. It almost could not have worked out better for Sean McDermott and his message this last week.
Right, 100% agree.
I got a question for you. Now you're talking about all these grinders on the team. Is there any surprise participants or non-participants in practice today?
I got a quick glance before I came on with you guys. Jordan Phillips is back. He missed practice yesterday due to illness, so he's back in the flow here. He's got his helmet on. Looks like he's doing everything, at least to this point, as they're now into individual position drills. Frank Gore did not have his helmet, so this could be a veteran rest day for him. Hopefully it's not an injury. A lot of the vets got the rest day yesterday. Maybe he gets his on Thursday, because he did not have a helmet and didn't look like he was dressed for practice. Wasn't taped up or anything. Haven't been able to spot Andre Roberts anywhere out here. But like I said, I just got a glancing look here before I had to turn around and face you guys. So he may still be out of commission, with that quad injury. And then no Taron Johnson here with the hamstring.
Yeah, that was my next question. Taron Johnson, and McDermott said yesterday he'd be day-to-day. And I wonder, if he can't go, you're probably looking at Siran Neal again as the nickel corner, essentially a starting spot on the Buffalo defense. What did you think of Neal's performance against the Jets, and what do they get from Siran Neal at the nickel corner spot?
Yeah, I mean, I thought he did okay. He wasn't airtight. I think he's still getting adjusted to what a regular season game communication is like, particularly on the road, because not only does he have to hear the calls from Edmonds or from the safeties if they're given some kind of disguised look or something different, but he's also got to relay it out to the corner. And there were a couple of times last week where you saw the corners outside kind of gesticulating to Siran like, hey, I need the call. Give me the call. What's the call? What are we playing? And so he's got to kind of get up to speed with that and get that call delivered in proper time. I think he was just so focused on what he had to do, he almost forgot, we got to play team defense out here. So that's easily correctable. I expect him to do that. And I think what he offers, maybe that Taron Johnson doesn't offer, or at least from a physical perspective, he's a more physically imposing player in the slot there. And I think, harder hitter for sure. I think he's also underrated as a blitzer off the edge. Not that Taron Johnson isn't too bad himself. In fact, they asked Johnson to do that in the early stages of the game last week before he went out with the hamstring injury. But I think people remember back to Siran Neal's first sack in his NFL career, which came up in Green Bay against the Packers on Aaron Rodgers on a blitz call. So he's capable of doing that. And I think his size is going to be important this week, especially if Sterling Shepard, who's in concussion protocol for the Giants, is not able to go. The word is they're going to turn to Russell Shepard, another receiver in that group, and he's a much taller, broader-shouldered receiver. I think he goes about 6'1", 215. So if you have a bigger slot guy like Siran Neal, who goes 6 foot and about 210 pounds himself, now you've got a guy that matches up better physically if there's a receiver there that wants to take him down the seam.
Hey, this is, and I don't know if you know this answer, Chris, but if Siran Neal were to get banged up and if he was a starter at nickel on Sunday, who'd back him up? Who do you think comes next?
Well, it was interesting. Yesterday at practice, Jim Salgado, one of the assistant secondary coaches, works chiefly with the nickel corners. That's kind of his specific job responsibility. So at practice yesterday, it was Siran, and then we also saw Dean Marlowe working with him, one of the reserve safeties. So it was interesting to see two guys who are quote-unquote safeties working at that nickel corner role.
I don't think of Siran as a safety anymore. Do you?
Probably not, just by virtue of the fact that he's been handed this job to learn all the way back in March and has kind of stayed there all the way through. They didn't give him any other job responsibilities outside of his special teams work. This is your spot. Let's learn it. Let's see how good you can get at it.
Yeah.
How's it going to affect the Bills' defense when the top two weapons for the offense they're facing isn't a guy like Quincy Enunwa or Jamison Crowder? It's a tight end for the Giants and the running back for the Giants.
Yeah, I mean, Evan Ingram's a tough matchup for sure. I don't think I need to say anything about Saquon Barkley. He's probably one of the top 2 running backs in football, and I think he's even now still underrated as a pass catcher out of the backfield. So not only is he going to get, I mean, and much has been made in New York about how Barkley only got 17 touches of the football last week and how that number's got to go up considerably, especially now with the strong likelihood that Shepard's not in the lineup. So I think he's going to be a frequent target for Eli Manning in the passing game. And then Ingram is the leading receiver on the team. He had 11 catches last week. So I think those are 2 dynamic weapons for this team. And, Ingram, people say, well, what kind of tight end is he? He's a guy that just flat out can run. Matter of fact, Evan Ingram and Dawson Knox both played on the same roster at Ole Miss. So they've had athletic tight ends there for a little bit of time now. So now to see that translate to the NFL, it's going to be a challenging matchup for Jordan Poyer. Presumably, he'll have the chief assignment on Ingram in the game.
Hey, Chris, thank you for this. We'll check with you again. Thank you.
All right, guys, take it easy.
Chris Brown, Bills Insider, BuffaloBills.com, live with us on the field from Bills practice going on out here today.